A reading from the book of Judith. Now, Arphaxad, king of the Medes, had brought many nations under his dominion, and he built a very strong city, which is called Ecbatana. Of the stone squares and hewed, he made walls thereof 70 cubits broad and 30 cubits high, and the towers thereof he made 100 cubits high. But on the square of them, each side was extended the space of 20 feet. And he made the gates thereof according to the height of the towers. And he gloried as a mighty one in the force of his army, and in the glory of his chariots. Now in the 20th year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, king of the Assyrians, who reigned in Nineveh, the great city fought against Arphaxad, and he overcame him. And the great plain, which is called Ragua, about the Euphrates and the Tigris, and the Jadison, and the plain of Iraq, the king of the Elysians. Then was the kingdom of Nebuchadnezzar exalted, and his heart was elevated, and he sent to all that dwelt in the Sicilia and Damascus and Libanus, and to the nations that are in Carmelis and Lasater, and to the inhabitants of the Galilee, in the plains, in the great plains of Asdraelion, and to all that were in the Samaria, and beyond the river Jordan, even to Jerusalem, and all the land of Jesse, till you come to the borders of Ethiopia. To all these Nebuchadnezzar, king of the Assyrians, sent messengers, but they all with one mind refused and sent them back empty, and rejected them without honor. Then King Nebuchadnezzar, being angry against all the land, swore by his throne and the kingdom that he would revenge himself of all these countries. In the 13th year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, the 22nd day of the first month, the word was given out in the house of Nebuchadnezzar, the king of the Assyrians, that he would revenge himself, and that he called all the ancients of all the governors and all his officers of war, and communicated to them the secret of his counsel. And he said that his thoughts were to bring all the earth under his empire. And when he was saying this pleased them all, Nebuchadnezzar the king called the Holofernes, the general of his armies, and said to him, Go out against all the kingdoms of the west, and against all them especially that despise my commandment. The eyes shall not spare any kingdom, and all the strong cities that thou bring under my yoke. Then Holofernes called the captains and officers and the powers of the Assyrians, and he mustered men for the expedition, as the king commanded him, 120,000 fighting men on foot, and 12,000 archers and horsemen. And he made all his warlike preparations to go before, with a multitude of innumerable camels, all the provisions sufficient for the armies in abundance, and the herds and the oxen and the flocks of sheep without number. And he appointed corn to be prepared out of all Syria in his passage. But gold and silver he took out of the king's house in great abundance. And he went forth, and he and all the army, and the chariots and the horsemen, and the archers, who covered the face of the earth like locusts. And when they had passed through the borders of the Assyrians, he came to the great mountain of Anij, which are on the left of Sicilia, and which went up to all the castles and took up the strong places. And then he took by assault the renowned city of Matholius and pillaged all the children of Tharsius and the children of Ishmael, who were given over against the face of the desert and the south and the land of uh, Silion. And he passed over the Euphrates and came to Mesopotamia, and he forced all the stately cities that were there from the torrent of Mamre to one uh, comes to the sea. And he took the borders thereof from Sicilia to the coast of Japheth, which are towards the south. And he carried away all the children of Midian, and he stripped them of all their riches, and all that resisted him he slew with the edge of the sword. And after these things he went down to the plains of Damascus. In the days of the harvest he set all the corn on fire, and he caused all the vineyards to be cut down. And the fear of them fell upon all the inhabitants of the land. Then the kings and the princes of all the cities of the provinces in Syria, Mesopotamia, Syria, Sobel, and Libya, and Sicilia, and all their ambassadors who were coming to Halofernes, said, "Let thy indignation towards us cease, for it is better for us to live and serve Nebuchadnezzar the great king, and be subject to thee, than to die and to perish, or to suffer the miseries of slavery. All of our cities and all of our provisions, all of our mountains and hills and fields and herds of oxen and flocks of sheep and goats and horses and camels and all of our goods and families are in thy sight. And let all that we have be subject to thy law." Both we and our children are thy servants. Come to us, a peaceable Lord, and use our service as it shall please thee. Then he came down from the mountains with horsemen with a great power, and made himself master of every city and all the inhabitants of the land. And from all the cities he took auxiliaries, valiant men, and chosen for war. And so great a fear lay upon all these provinces that the inhabitants of the cities, both princes and nobles, as well as people, went out to meet him at his coming. And he received him with garlands and lights and dances and trembles and flutes. And though they did these things, they could not for all that mitigate the fierceness of his heart. For he both destroyed their cities and cut down their groves. For Nebuchadnezzar the king had commanded him to destroy all the gods of the earth, that he only might be called God by these nations which could be brought under him by the power of Halofernes. And when he had passed through all of Syria, Sobal, and all of Apimia, and all the Mesopotamia, and he came to the Endumenians, into the land of Gaba, and he took possession of their cities, and stayed there for 30 days, in which the city he commanded all the troops of the army to be united. Then the children of Israel who dwelt in the land of Judea, hearing these things, were exceedingly afraid of him. Dread and horror seized upon their minds, lest he go do the same to Jerusalem and to the temple of the Lord, and that he had done to other cities and their temples. And they sent into all Samaria round about as far as Jericho, and seized upon all the tops of the mountains. And they compassed their towns with walls and gathered together corn for the provision for war. And the Eliachim, the priest, wrote to all who were over against the Estrelion, which faces great plain near uh, Do- Dolathane, and to all that who there might be a passage of way, that they should take possession of the assets of the mountains, by which they might be any way to Jerusalem, and should keep watch where the way was narrow between the mountains. And the children of Israel did as the priests of the Lord uh, Eliachim had appointed them. And all the people cried to the Lord with great earnestness, and they humbled their souls in fasting and prayers, both they and their wives. And the priests put on haircloths, and they caused the little children to lie prostrate before the temple of the Lord and the altar of the Lord. They covered with haircloth, and they cried to the Lord, the God of Israel, with one accord, and their children might not be made prey, and their wives carried off, and their cities destroyed, and their holy things profaned, and they might not be made a reproach to the Gentiles. Then Eliachim, the high priest of the Lord, went about all Israel and spoke to them, saying, Know ye, the Lord will hear your prayers, if you continue with perseverance in fasting and prayers in the sight of the Lord. Remember Moses, the servant of the Lord, who overcame Amalek and uh, trusted in his own strength and his power and his army and all his shields and all the chariots and all the horsemen, not by fighting with the sword, but by holy prayers. So shall all the enemies of Israel be, if you persevere this work which you have begun. And so, being moved by the exhortation of his, prayed to the Lord and continued in the sight of the Lord, so that even they who offered the holocaust to the Lord offered sacrifices to the Lord, girded with haircloths and with ashes upon their head, and they begged of God with all their hearts that he would visit his people Israel. And it was told Holofernes, the general of the army of the Syrians, that the children of Israel prepared themselves to resist, and had shut up ways to the mountains. And he was transported with the exceedingly great fury and indignation. And he called all the princes of Moab and the leaders of Ammon, and he said to them, Tell me, what is the people that besetteth the mountains? Or what are their cities, and what sort? How great? Also, what is their power? Or what is their multitude? Or who is their king over their warfare? And why they above all dwell in the east, that despises us, and have not come out to meet us, that they might receive us with peace? Then Achior, the captain of the children of Ammon, answering said, If thou wilt vouchsafe, my lord, to hear, I will tell the truth of thy sight concerning this people that dwelleth with the mountains, and there shall not a false word come out of my mouth. This people of the offspring of the Chaldeans, they dwell first in Mesopotamia, because they would not follow the gods of the fathers, who were in the land of the Chaldeans. Wherefore, forsaking the ceremonies of their fathers, which consisted in the worship of many gods, they worshipped one God of heaven, who commanded them to depart from thence and dwell in Cheran. And when there was a famine over all the land, they went down into Egypt, and there for 400 years were so multiplied that the army of them could not be numbered. And when the king of Egypt oppressed them and made them slaves, them to labor in clay and brick in the building of the cities, they cried to their Lord, and he struck the whole land of Egypt with divers plagues. And when the Egyptians had cast them out from them, the plague had ceased from them, and they had a mind to take them again and bring them back to their service. The God of heaven opened the sea in them in their flight, so that the waters made to stand firm as the wall on the other side, and they walked through the bottom of the sea and passed in dry foot. And when an innumerable army of the Egyptians pursued them after the place, they were so overwhelmed with the waters that they were not one um, there was not one left. Uh, no, with the innumerable armies of the Egyptians pursued them in that place, they were so overwhelmed with the waters that there was not one left to tell what had happened to the posterity. And after they came out of the Red Sea, they abode in the deserts of the Mount Sinai, in which never man could dwell, or the Son of Man rested. There bitter fountains were made sweet for them to drink, and for 40 years they received food from heaven. Moreover, they went in without bow and arrow, and without shield and sword. Their God fought for them and overcame, and there was no one that triumphed over the people. But when they departed from the worship of the Lord their God, but as often as that beset their own God, they worshipped many other, they were given to spoil and the sword and to reproach. As often as they were penitent for having revolted from him the worship of their God, the God of the heavens gave them power to resist. So they overthrew the king of the Canaanites and the Jebusites and the Pharezites and the Hittites and the Hivites and the Amorites and all the mighty ones of uh, Hezbon, and they possessed their lands and their cities. And as the land, as they sinned not in the sight of their God, and all well of them, for their land, or for their God hateth iniquity. And even some years ago, when they had revolted from the way which God had given them to walk therein, they were destroyed in battles by the nations, and were very many of them were led away captive into a strange land. But of late, returning to the Lord their God from the different places wherein they were scattered, they are come together, and are gone up into all these mountains, and possess Jerusalem again. And their holies are now, therefore, my Lord searcheth if there be any iniquity of theirs in the sight of their God. Let us go up to them, because their God will assuredly deliver them to thee, and they shall be brought under the yoke of thy power. But if there be no offense of this people in the sight of their God, we cannot resist them, because their God will defend them, and we shall be a reproach to the whole earth. And if it came to pass, when Achior had ceased to speak these words, all the great men of Holofernes were angry, and they had the mind to kill him, saying to each other, Who is this that saith to the children of Israel, Who can resist King Nebuchadnezzar and his armies? men unarmed, and without force, and without skill in the art of war. That Achior therefore may know that he deceiveth us, let us go up into the mountains. And when the bravest of them shall be taken, then shall be with them that stabbeth with the sword. That every nation that may know Nebuchadnezzar is a god of the earth, and besides him there is no other. And it came to pass, when they had left off the speaking, that Holofernes, being in a violent passion, said to Achior, because thou hast prophesied unto us, saying that the nation of Israel is defended by their God, to show that there is no God but Nebuchadnezzar, when we shall slay them all as one man, then thou shalt die with them by the sword of the Assyrians, and all the Israel shall perish with thee. And thou shalt find that Nebuchadnezzar is the Lord of the whole earth, and then the sword of my soldiers shall pass through thy sides, and thou shalt be stabbed and fall among the wounded of Israel, and thou shalt breathe no more till thou be destroyed with them. But if thou think thy prophecy true, let not thy countenance sink, and let the paleness that is on thy face depart from thee. If thou imaginest these my words cannot be accomplished, then that thou mayest know that thou shalt experience these things together with them. Behold, from that hour thou shalt be associated to the people, that when they shall receive the punishment they deserve from my sword, thou shalt fall under the same vengeance. And Holofernes commanded his servants to take Achior, and to lead him to uh, Bethuel, and to deliver him into the hands of the children of Israel. And the servants of Holofernes, taking him, went through the plains. But when they came near the mountains, the slingers came out against them. Then turning out by the way of the side of the mountain, they tied Achior to the tree, hand and foot, and left him bound with ropes, and returned to their master. And the children of Israel, coming down to Bethuel, came to him, and loosening him, they brought him to Bethuel, and setting him in the midst of the people, asked him what was the matter, that the Assyrians had left him bound. In those days the rulers there were Ozias the son of Micah, and the tribe of Simeon, and Trebini, called the uh, Gothoniel. And Achior related in the midst of the ancients, and the presence of the people, all that had said, being asked of the Holofernes, how the people of Holofernes would have killed him for this word, and how Holofernes himself, being angry, had commanded him to be delivered for this cause to the Israelites, that when he should overcome the children of Israel, he might command Achior also himself to be put to death by diverse torments, for having said, the God of heaven is their defender. Then Achior had declared all these things, and all the people fell upon their faces, adoring the Lord, and all of them together, mourning and weeping, poured out their prayers with one accord to the Lord, saying, O Lord God of heaven and earth, behold their pride, and look on our low condition, and have regard to the face of thy saints, and show that thou forsakest not them that trusteth thee, and that thou humblest them that presume of themselves the glory of their own strength. So their weeping was ended, and the people's prayer, in which they had continued all the day, was concluded, and they comforted Achior, saying, "The God of our fathers, whose power thou hast set forth, will make this return to thee, that thou rather shalt see their destruction. And when the Lord our God shall give this liberty to his servants, let God be with thee also in the midst of us, that, as it shall please thee, so thou all thine mayest converse with us." Then Ozias, after the assembly was broken up, received him into his house, and made him a great supper. And all the ancients were invited, and they refreshed themselves together after their fast was over. And afterwards, all the people were called together, and they prayed over. They prayed all the night long within the church, desiring help of the God of Israel. But Holofernes on the next day gave orders to his army to go up against Bethuel. Now there were in his troops 120,000 footmen and 2,000 sorry, and 20,000 horsemen, besides the preparation of those men who had been brought away out of the provinces and the cities of the youth. All these prepared themselves together to fight against the children of Israel. And they came by the hillside to the top, which looketh toward Donathan, from the place which was called Belmel, upon the Chelmon, which is over against the Australian. But the children of Israel, when they saw the multitude of them, prostrated themselves upon the ground, putting ashes on their heads, and praying with one accord that the God of Israel would show his mercy upon his people. And taking their arms of war, they posted themselves in places which a narrow pathway led directly between the mountains, and they guarded them all day and night. Now Holofernes, going around about, found that the fountain which had supplied them with water ran through the aqueduct without the city on the south side, and he commanded the aqueduct to be cut off. Nevertheless, there were springs not far from the walls, out of which they were secretly to draw water to refresh themselves a little rather than to drink their fill. But the children of Ammon and Moab came to Holofernes, and saying, "The children of Israel trust not in their spears, nor their arrows, but in the mountains are their defense, and the steep hills and the precipices guard them. Wherefore, that thou mayest overcome them without joining battle, set guards at the springs, that they may not draw water out of them, and thou shalt destroy them without the sword, or at least being wearied out, that they may yield up their city, which they suppose, because it is situate in the mountains, to be impregnable." And these words placed Holofernes and his officers, and he placed all around about 100 men at every spring. And when they had kept this watch for full 20 days, the cisterns and the reserve of waters failed among all the inhabitants of Bethuel, and so that there was not within the city enough to satisfy them. No, not for one day, for the water was daily given out of the people by measure. Then all the men and women, young and the children, gathering themselves together to Ozias, all together with one voice, said, God be judge between us and thee, for thou hast done evil against us, in that thou wouldest not speak peacefully with the Assyrians. And for this cause God hath sold us into their hands, and therefore there is no one to help. Us, so that we are cast down before their eyes in thirst and sad destruction. And now assemble ye all that are in the city, that we may of our own accord yield ourselves up to like, all up to the people of Holofernes. For it is better that being captives we should live and bless the Lord, than that we should die and be a reproach to all flesh, after we have seen our wives and our infants die before our eyes. We call to witness this day heaven and earth, and the God of our fathers, who taketh vengeance upon us according to our sins, conjuring you to deliver now the city into the hand of the army of Holofernes, and our end may be short by the edge of the sword, which is made longer by the drought of thirst. And when they had said these things, there were a great weeping and lamentation of all in the assembly. For many hours, with one voice, they cried to God, saying, We have sinned with our fathers, and we have done unjustly. We have committed iniquity. Have thou mercy on us, because thou art good, or punish our iniquities by chastising us thyself, and deliver not them that trust in thee to a people that knoweth not thee, that they may not say among the Gentiles, Where is their God? And when being wearied with these cries, they tried with these weepings, they held their peace. Ozias, raising up their tears, said, Be of good courage, my brethren. Let us wait these 5 days for mercy from the Lord. For perhaps he will put a stop to the indignation, and will give glory to his own name. But if after 5 days he be past, there come no aid, we will do the things which you have spoken. Now it came to pass, when Judith, a widow who had heard these things, who was a daughter of Merari, the son of Edox, the son of Joseph, the son of Ozias, the son of Eliah, the son of uh, Genon, the son of Gideon, and the son of Rephaim, the son of uh, Achitop, and the son of Malchias, and the son of Enan, and the son of Nathanias, and the son of uh, Selelioth, and the son of Simeon, and the son of Reuben. And her husband was Manasseh, who had died in the time of barley harvest, for he was standing over them that bound sheaves in the field. And heat came upon his head, and he died in Bethulia, in his own city, and he was buried with his fathers. And Judith was a widow now 3 years and 6 months, and she made herself a private chamber in the upper part of her house, in which she abode shut up with her maids. And she wore haircloth upon her loins, and fasted all the days of her life, except the Sabbaths and the new moons and the feasts of the house of Israel. And she was exceedingly beautiful, and her husband left her great riches and very uh, many servants, large possessions of the herds of the oxen, flocks of the sheep. And she was greatly renowned among all because she feared the Lord very much. Neither was there any one that spoken of ill word of her. When therefore she had heard that Ozias had promised that he would deliver up the city after 5 days, she sent to the ancients Chebrari and Cham, Charmi. When they came to her, and she said to them, What is the what is this word by which Ozias hath consented to give up the city to the Assyrians, if within 5 days there come no aid to us? And who are you that to tempt the Lord? This is not the word that may draw down mercy, but rather that they may stir up wrath and kindle indignation. You have set the time for the mercy of the Lord, and you have appointed him a day according to your pleasure. But forasmuch as the Lord is patient, let us be penitent for the same thing, and with many tears let us beg his pardon. For God will not threaten like man, nor be inflamed to anger like a son of man. Therefore, let us humble our souls before him, and continuing in a humble spirit in his service, let us ask the Lord with tears that according to his will, so he should show his mercy to us, that our hearts be troubled by their pride, and also their many glorify with our humility. And for we have not followed the sins of our fathers, who forsook their God and worshipped strange gods, and which crime were given up into their enemies, to the sword, to pillage, and to confusion. But we know no other God but him. Let us humbly wait for his consolation, and the Lord our God will require our blood of afflictions of our enemies, and he will humble all the nations that shall rise up against us, and bring them to disgrace. And now, brethren, as you and the ancients among the people of God, their very soul resteth upon you, comfort your hearts by speech, and they may be mindful how our fathers were tempted, that they might prove whether they worship their God truly. They they must remember how to how our father Abraham was tempted, and being proven by many tribulations was made the friend of God. So Isaac, so Jacob, so Moses, and all who have pleased God passed through many tribulations, remaining faithful. But they did not receive the troubles with fear of the Lord, but uttered their impatience, and their reproach and their murmurings against the Lord were destroyed by the destroyer, and perished by the servants. As for us, therefore, let us not revenge ourselves for these things which we suffer, but esteeming these very punishable punishments be to be less than our sins deserve, let us believe that the scourges of the Lord, with which like servants we are chastised, have happened for our amendment, and not for our destruction. Ozias and the ancients said to her, all the things which that thou hast spoken are true. And uh, Ozias and the ancients said to her, all these things which thou hast spoken are true, and there is nothing to be reprehended in thy words. Now therefore pray for us, for thou art a holy woman, and one fearing God. And Judith saith to them, as you know that what I have been able to say is of God, so that which I intend to do prove ye if it be of God, and pray that God may strengthen my design. You shall stand at the gate of this night, and I will go out into the maidservant and pray ye that, as you have said, in 5 days the Lord may look down upon his people Israel. But I desire that you search not into what I am doing, until I bring you word. Let nothing else be done, but to pray for me to the Lord our God. Now Ozias, the prince of Judah, said to her, go in peace, and the Lord be with thee to take vengeance of our enemies. So returning, they departed. And when they were gone, Judith went into her oratory, and putting on haircloth, laid ashes on her head, and falling down prostrate before the Lord, she cried to the Lord, saying, O Lord God of my father Simeon, who gavest him a sword to execute vengeance against the strangers who had defiled by their uncleanness, uncovered the virgin unto confusion, and who gavest their wives to be made prey, and their daughters into captivity, and all their spoils into to be divided to thy servants, who were zealous with thy zeal assist. I beseech thee, O Lord God, me a widow, for thou hast done the things of old, and hast devised one thing after another, and what thou hast designed hath been done. For all thy ways are prepared, and in thy providence thou hast placed thy judgments. Look upon the camp of the Assyrians now, as thou hast pleased to look upon the camp of the Egyptians, when they pursued armed after thy servants, trusting in their chariots and their horsemen and their multitude of warriors. But thou lookest over their camp, and darkness wearied them, and the dark held their feet. The deep held their feet, and the waters overwhelmed them, so that they may be with thee also, O Lord, who trust in their multitude, and their chariots, and their pikes, and their shields, and their arrows, and the glory of their spears, and know not that thou art God, who destroyeth wars from the beginning, and the Lord is thy name. Lift up thy arm from the beginning, and crush their power with the power. Lift up thy arm from the beginning, and crush their power with thy power. Let their power fall in their wrath, who promise themselves to violate thy sanctuary, and defile the dwelling place of thy name, and to beat down with their sword, to burn down thy altar, to beat down with their sword the horn of thy altar. Bring to pass, O Lord, that his pride may be cut off with his own sword. Let him be caught in the net of his own eyes, in my regard, and do thou strike him by the graces of the words of my lips. Give me consistency in mind. I may despise him, and fortitude that I may overthrow him. For this will be a glorious monument for thy name when he shall fall by the hand of a woman. For thy power, O Lord, is not in the multitude, nor in thy pleasure in the strength of horses, nor in the beginnings. They have proud been acceptable to thee, but the prayer of the humble and the meek hath always pleased thee. O God of heavens, creator of the waters, the Lord of the whole creation, hear me, a poor wretch, making supplication to thee, and presuming of thy mercy. Remember, O Lord, thy covenants, and put thou words in my mouth, and strengthen the resolution of my heart, that thy house may continue in thy holiness, and all the nations may acknowledge that thou art God, and there is no other besides thee. And it came to pass, when she had ceased to cry to the Lord, that she rose from the place wherein she lay prostrate before the Lord. And she called her maid, and going down into her house, she took off her haircloth, and put away the garments of her widowhood. And she washed her body, and anointed herself with the best ointment, and plaited her hair with of her head, and put the bonnet upon her head, and clothed herself in the garments of her gladness, and put sandals on her feet, and took her bracelets and lilies, and earlets and rings, and adorned herself with all her ornaments. And the Lord also gave her more beauty, because of thy dressing up did not uh, proceed from sensuality, but from the virtue. And therefore the Lord increased in her in this her beauty, so that she appeared to be all men's eyes incomparably lovely. And she gave to her maids the bottle of wine to carry, and the vessel of oil, and parched corn, and dry figs, and bread and cheese, and went out. And when they came to the gate of the city, they found Ozias and the ancients of the city waiting. And when they saw her, they were astonished, and admired her beauty exceedingly. And they asked her no question, only that they were let her pass, saying, The God of our fathers gave thee grace, and may be strengthened of all the counsel of thy heart, and his power, and that Jerusalem may glory in thee, and they and thy name may be in the number of the holy and the just. And they that were there said, all with one voice, So be it, so be it. But Judith, praying to the Lord, passed through the gates, and she and her maid. And it came to pass, when they went down to the hill about the break of the day, that the watchmen of the Assyrians met her, and stopped her, saying, Whence comest thou, and whither goest thou? And she answereth, I am the daughter of the Hebrews, and I have fled from them, because I knew that they would be made a prey to you, because they despise you, and that you would not of their own accord yield themselves, that they might find mercy in your sight. For this reason I thought with myself, saying, I will go to the presence of the prince Holofernes, that I may tell him their secrets, and show him by what way he may take them, without the loss of man, no one of his army. And when the men heard of her words, they behold her face, and her eyes were amazed, and they wondered exceedingly at her beauty. And they said to her, Thou hast saved thy life by taking this resolution to come down to our Lord. And be assured of this, that when thou shalt stand before him, he will treat thee well, and thou wilt be most acceptable to his heart. And they brought her to the tent of the Holofernes, telling him of her. And when she came into the presence, forthwith Holofernes was caught by its eyes. And the officers said to him, Who can despise the people of the Hebrews, who have such beautiful women, that we should not think it worth our while for their sakes to fight against them? And Judith, seeing Holofernes sitting under the canopy, which was woven of purple and gold, with emeralds and precious stones, after she had looked on the face of, bowed down to him, prostrating herself to the ground. And the servants of the Holofernes lifted her up by the command of their master. Then Holofernes said to her, Be of good comfort, and fear not in thy heart, for I have never hurt a man that was willing to serve Nebuchadnezzar the king. And if thy people had not despised me, I would have lifted up my spear against them. But now tell me, for what cause hast thou left them, and why it hath pleased thee to come to us? And Judith said to him, Receive the words of thy handmaid, for if thou wilt follow the words of thy handmaid, the Lord will do with thee a perfect thing. For as Nebuchadnezzar the king of the earth liveth, and his power liveth, which is in thee for chastising of all the straying souls, not only men serve him through thee, but also the beasts of the fields obey him. For the industry of thy mind is spoken of among all the nations, and is told through the whole world, that thou only art excellent and mighty in all the kingdoms, and thy discipline is cried up in all the provinces. It is known also what Achior said, nor are we ignorant of what thou hast commanded to be done to him. For it is certain that our God is so offended with the sins, that he hath sent word by prophets to the people, that he will deliver them up to their sins. And because of the children of Israel, no, they have offended their God, their dread is upon them. Moreover, also the famine hath come upon them, and for drought of water they are already to be counted among the dead. And they have designed even to kill their cattle, and to drink the blood of them, and the consecrated things of the Lord their God, which God forbade them to touch, and corn, wine, and oil, these they have pursued to make use of, and they design to consume them with the things which they ought not to touch with their hands. Therefore, because they do these things, and certain they will be given up to destruction. And I, thy handmaid, knowing this, and fled from them. And the Lord hath sent me to tell thee these very things. For I, thy handmaid, worship God, even now, that I am with thee, and thy handmaid will go out, and I will pray to God, and he will tell me when he will repay them for their sins. And I will come and tell thee, so that I may bring thee through the midst of the Jerusalem, and thou shalt have all the people of Israel as sheep that have no shepherd, and there shall not such so much as one dog bark against thee, because these things are told me by the providence of God, and because God is angry with them. I sent I am sent to tell the very things to thee, and all the words pleased Holofernes and his servants, and they admired her wisdom, and they said to one another, there is not another woman upon earth to look in beauty in sense of words, and in sense of words. And Holofernes said to her, God hath done well, who sent thee before the people, that thou mightest give them unto our hands. And because thy promise is good, if thy God shall do this for me, he shall also be my God, and thou shalt be great in the house of Nebuchadnezzar, and thy name shall be renowned through all the earth. Then he ordered that he shall go in where his treasures were laid up, and bade her tarry there, and appointed what should be given her from his own table. And Judith answered him and said, now I cannot eat of these things which thou commandest to be given me, lest sin come upon me. But I will eat of the things which I have brought. And Holofernes said to her, if these things which thou hast brought with thee fail thee, what shall we do for thee? And Judith said, as thy soul liveth, my lord, thy handmaid shall not spend all these things till God do by my hand, at which I have pursued, at which I have been purposed. And his servants brought her unto the tent which he had commanded. And when she was going in, she desired that she might have the liberty to go out at night and day before to prayer and to beseech the Lord. And he commanded his chamberlains that she might go out in and out to adore her God as she pleased for 3 days. She went out into the night into the valley of Bethiel and washed herself in the fountain of water. And as she came up, she prayed to the Lord, the God of Israel, that he would direct her way to deliverance of the people. And going in, she remained pure in the tent till she took her own meat in the evening. And it came to pass the 4th day, Holofernes made a supper for his servants, and said to Vago, his eunuch, go and persuade the Hebrew woman to consent of her own accord to dwell with me. For it looked upon as shameful among the Assyrians if a woman mock a man by doing so as to pass free from him. Then Vago went in to Judith and said, let not my good maid be afraid to go in to my lord, that she may be honored before his face, and that she may eat with him and drink wine and be merry. And Judith answered him with, who I am, what should I gainsay my lord? All shall be good and best before his eyes I will do, and whatsoever shall please him, that shall be best to me all the days of my life. And she arose and dressed herself with her garments. And going in, she stood before his face. And the heart of Holofernes was smitten, for he was burning with a desire of her. And Holofernes said to her, Drink now, and sit down, and be merry, for thou hast found favor before me. And Judith said, I will drink, my lord, because my life is manifested this day above all my days. And she took and ate and drank before him what her maid had prepared for her. And Holofernes was made merry on her occasion, and drank exceedingly much wine, as so much as he had never drunk in his life. And when it was grown late, his servant made haste to their lodgings, and Vago shut the chamberlain doors and went his way, and they were all overcharged with wine. And Judith was alone in the chamber, but Holofernes lay on her bed, fast asleep, being exceedingly drunk. And Judith spoke to her maid to stand without before the chamber, and to be watch. And Judith stood before the bed, praying with tears, and the motion of her lips in silence, saying, Strengthen me, O Lord God of Israel, and this hour look on the works of my hands, that thou hast a promise. Thou mayest rise up Jerusalem, the city, and that I may bring to pass that which I purposed, having a belief that it might be done by thee. And when she had said this, she went to the pillar that was on his bed head, and loosened his sword that hung tied upon it. And when she had drawn it out, she took him by the hair of his head, and said, Strengthen me, O God, at this hour. And she struck twice his neck, and cut off his head, and took off his canopy from the pillars, and rolled away his headless body. And after a while she went out and delivered the head of Holofernes to her maid, and bade her to put in her wallet. And when they two went out according to their custom, as it were to prayer, and to pass the camp, and having compassed the valley, they came to the gate of the city. And Judith from afar off cried to the watchman upon the walls, Open the gates, for God is with us, who hath shown his power in Israel. And it came to pass, when the men had heard her voice, that they called the ancients of the city, and all ran to meet her from the least to the greatest, for they now had no hopes that she would come. And lifting up their lights, they gathered about her. And when she went up to the higher place, and commanded silence to be made, and all who had held their peace, Judith said, Praise ye the Lord our God, who hath not forsaken them that hoped in him. And by me, his handmaid, he hath fulfilled his mercy, which he promised to the house of Israel. And he hath killed the enemy of his people by my hand this night. Then she brought forth the head of Holofernes out of the wallet, and showed it to them, saying, Behold the head of Holofernes, the general of the army of the Assyrians, and behold the canopy wherein he lay in his drunkenness, where the Lord our God slew him by the hand of a woman. But as the same Lord liveth. His angel hath been my keeper, both going hence and abiding there, and returning from thence hither. And the Lord hath not suffered me, his handmaid, to be defiled, but hath brought me back to you from pollution of sin, rejoicing for his victory, for my escape, and for your deliverance. Give all you the glory to him, because he is good, because his mercy endureth forever. And they all adored the Lord, and said to her, The Lord hath blessed thee by his power, because by thee hath brought our enemies to naught. And Ozias, the prince of the people of Israel, said to her, Blessed art thou, O daughter, by the Lord, the most high God, above all women upon the earth. Blessed be the Lord who made heaven and earth, and who hath directed thee to be cutting off the head of the prince of our enemies, because he hath so magnified thy name this day, that thy praise shall not depart out of the mouth of men, who shall be mindful of the power of the Lord forever. For thou hast not spared thy life by reason of distress and tribulation of thy people, but thou hast prevented our ruin in the presence of our God. And all the people said, So be it, so be it. And Achior, being called, came for being called for came. And Judith said to him, The God of Israel, of whom thou gavest testimony, that he revengeth himself of his enemies, he hath cut off his head of all of the unbelievers this night by my hand, and that thou mayest find that it is so. Behold, the head of Holofernes, who is in contempt of his pride, despised the God of Israel, and threatened thee with death, saying, When the people of Israel shall be taken, I will command thy aids to be pierced with a sword. Then Achior, seeing the head of Holofernes being seized with a great fear, he fell on his face upon the earth, and his soul sootheth away. But after he had recovered his spirits, he fell down at her feet and revenged her and said, or reverenced her, revered her, and said, Blessed art thou by thy God in every tabernacle of Jacob, for in every nation which shall bear thy name, the God of Israel shall be magnified on the occasion of thee. And Judith, and to all the people, hear me, my brethren, hang ye up this head upon our walls, and as soon as the sun shall rise, let every man take his arms, and rush ye not on as going down beneath, but as making an assault. Then the watchmen must needs run to awake their prince for the battle. And when the captains of them shall run to the tent of Holofernes, and shall find him without his head, wallowing in blood, fear shall fall upon them. And when they shall know that they are fleeing, go after them securely, for the Lord will destroy them under your feet. Then Achior, seeing the power that God of Israel had wrought, leaving the religion of the Gentiles to be believed God, and circumcised the flesh of the foreskin, and was joined to the people of Israel with all the succession of his kindred, until this present day, And immediately at the break of day, they lifted up the head of Holofernes upon the walls, and every man took his arms, and they went out with a great noise and shouting. And the watchmen, seeing this, ran to the tent of Holofernes, and they that were in the tent came and made a noise before the door of the chamber to awaken, and endeavoring by the art to break his rest, that Holofernes might awake, not by their calling to him, but by their noise. For no man durst knock or open or go into the chamber of the general of the Assyrians. But when the captains and the tribunes were uh, were come, and all the chiefs of the army of the king of the Assyrians, they said to their chamberlains, "Go in and awake him, for the mice are coming out of their holes, and having perfumed to challenge us to fight." Then Vago, going into the chamber, stood before the curtain, and made a clapping with his hands, for he thought that he was sleeping with Judith. And the when the hearkening he perceived no motion of lying, no one lying, he came near the curtains, and lifting it up, and seeing the body of Holofernes lying upon the ground without a head, weltering in his blood, he cried out with a loud voice with weeping, and rent his garments. And he went into the tent of Judith, and not finding her, she ran out, or he ran out to the people, and said, "One Hebrew woman hath made confusion in the house of the king Nebuchadnezzar. For behold, Holofernes lieth upon the ground, and his head is not with him upon him." Now wherewith the chiefs of the army of the Assyrians had heard, that they all rent their garments, and an intolerable fear, they dread, fell upon them, and their minds were troubled exceedingly, and there was a great cry in the midst of their camp. And when all the army had heard that the Holofernes was beheaded, courage and counsel fled from them, and being seized with trembling and fear, they thought only to save themselves by flight. So that no one spoke to the neighbor, but hanging down the head, leaving all things behind, they made haste to escape from the Hebrews, who, as they heard, were coming armed upon them, and fled by the ways of the fields and the paths of the hills. So the children of Israel, seeing them fleeing, followed them, and they went down, sounding with the trumpets, and shouting after them. And because the Assyrians were not united together, they went without order in their flight. But the children of Israel, pursuing in one body, defeated all that they could find. And Uzziah sent messengers through all the cities, the countries of Israel, in every country and every city, sent their chosen young men armed after them, and they pursued them with the edge of the sword until they come to the extremities of their confines. And the rest that were in Bethuel went into the camp of the Assyrians, and took away the spoils which the Assyrians in their flight had left upon them behind them, and they were laden exceedingly. But they were returned conquerors to Bethuel, brought with them all things that were theirs, so that there was no numbering of their cattle and beasts and their movables, inasmuch that from the least to the greatest all were made rich by their spoils. And Jonachim, the high priest, came from Jerusalem to Bethuel with all his ancients to see Judith. And when she came to him, they all blessed her with one voice, saying, Thou art the glory of Jerusalem, thou art the joy of Israel, thou art the honor of our people. For thou hast done manfully, and thy heart has been strengthened, because thou hast loved chastity, and after thy husband hath not known another. Therefore also the hand of the Lord hath strengthened thee, and therefore thou shalt be blessed forever. And all the people said, So be it, so be it. And the 30 days were scarcely sufficient for the people of Israel to gather up the spoils of the Assyrians. But of all these things they were proved to be the particular goods of Halofernes. They gave to Judith in gold and silver and garments and precious stones and all the household stuff, and they that were delivered to her by the people. And all the people rejoiced with the women and the virgins and the young men, playing on instruments and harps. Then Judith sung the canticle to the Lord, saying, Begin ye to the Lord with trembles. Sing ye to the Lord with cymbals. Tune unto him a new song. Extol and call upon his name. The Lord putteth an end to wars. The Lord in his name, he hath set up his camp in the midst of his people to deliver us from the hand of all of our enemies. The Assyrians came out of the mountains from the north, and the multitude of his strength, and the multitude stopped up the torrents, and their horses covered the valleys. He bragged that he would set my borders on fire, and kill my young men with the sword, and to make my infants a prey and my virgins captives. But the Almighty Lord hath struck him, and hath delivered him into the hands of a woman, and hath slain him. For their Almighty One did not, or for their Mighty One did not fall by the young men, neither did the sons of Titan strike him, nor tall giants oppose themselves to him. But Judith, the daughter of Merari, weakened him with the beauty of her face, for she put off the garments of widowhood, and put on the garments of joy, and gave joy to the children of Israel. And she appointed her face with the anointment, and bound up her locks with the crown. And she took a new robe to deceive him. Her sandals ravished his eyes, and beauty made his soul her captive. With a sword she cut off his head. The Persians quaked at her constancy, and the Medes at her boldness. And the camp of the Assyrians howled when a lowly one appeared, parched with thirst. The sons of the damsels have pierced through, and have killed them like children, fleeing away. They perished in battle before the face of the Lord my God. Let us sing a hymn to the Lord. Let us sing a new hymn to our God. O Adonai, Lord, great art thou, and glorious in thy power, and no one can overcome thee. Let all thy creatures serve thee because thou hast spoken, and they were made. Thou didst send forth thy spirit, and thy crush, and they were created, and there is no one that can resist thy voice. The mountains shall be moved from the foundations with the waters, and the rocks shall melt as wax before thy face. But when that fear thee, but they that fear thee shall be great with thee in all things. Woe to the nation that riseth up against thy people, against my people, for the Lord Almighty will take vengeance upon them. In the day of judgment he will visit them. For he will give fire and worms unto their flesh, and they will burn, and may feel forever. And it came to pass after these things, all the people after the victory came to Jerusalem to adore the Lord. And as soon as they were purified, they all offered holocausts and vows of their promises. And Judith offered for anathema of the oblivion all the arms of the Holofernes, which then the people gave her, and the canopy that she had taken away out of his chamber. And the people were joyful in the sight of the sanctuary. For the 3 months the joy of this victory was celebrated with Judith. And after these days every man returned to his home, and Judith was made great in Bethuel, and she was most renowned in all the land of Israel. And chastity was joined to her virtue, so that she knew no man all the days of her life after the death of Manasseh her husband. And the festival days she came forth with great glory, and she abode in her husband's house 105 years, and made her handmaid free, and she died. And she was buried with her husband in Bethuel, and all the people mourned for her 7 days. And all the time of her life, there was none that troubleth Israel, nor many years after her death. But the day of her festivity of this victory is received by the Hebrews in the number of holy days, and is religiously observed by the Jews from that day until this day. The conclusion of the book of Jude. Deo gratias, in nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen.